Went from condos to Pop's house. On calls now bus routes.
All right, N2S family, let's get to the next video. So, you know, I like to always see what other content creators are talking about, right? And one of the content creators that I watch, you know, frequently, you know, he does, you know, he do very good commentary when it comes down to reaction videos and things like that. And that's Anton Daniels. So shout out to Anton Daniels. Yeah, really good at what he do. Really good at what he do. Also a businessman, you know, and businessman to businessman, I could tell he know what he's talking about when he talk about business, right? So just recently, he was reacting to a video of a man who was a millennial. I would say he's a millennial. You know, I'm a millennial as well. You know what I'm saying? So he was breaking down what the man was saying, because the man was basically blaming the older men, the older generation, right? I'm gonna say our uncles, our fathers, and things like that, for this generation of YNs, even us as millennials, right? And Anton basically was breaking down the things that he was saying, giving his perspective. When I saw this video, I was like, this is something that I talk about a lot. So what I want to do today is I want to react to not just what the man was saying, who Anton was reacting to, but I want to react to some of the things that Anton said as well, because Anton, again, was just giving his perspective from his worldly view, his upbringing, right? His childhood. And there's a different perspective to give as well, because as I could see, my childhood was very different than Anton's, right? So let's go on and look at it. And this is going to be one of those videos where I'm going to pause it and speak a little bit as we're watching the video too. So we'll go through it like that. All right. So let's get to it.
Nowadays, a lot of people like to blame the YNs for how they behaving nowadays. But I'm gonna honestly tell y'all the truth. A lot of them, they don't know no better. And the real problem is them generation of men before us. You feel me? The generation of old. Them is the real problem. And let me explain why. Some people will look at society and like, damn, look at what it's become. But to be honest, to you men of old, y'all the ones that left us this situation. Y'all the ones left us with the grievances of our aunties or these women or y'all daughters and like that for us to deal with all this trauma and all this unmet love that they had out here because of y'all. And instead of you coming back to try to build and make it right, y'all went on and started a whole new family, didn't even think about the family that you once created. Or a lot of you older had families across towns and you wasn't being honorable by the first wife. And then I understand sometimes y'all felt like happy wife, happy life, but at the same time, you a man. You supposed to set the on. I get it. A lot of y'all want to just pay bills and throw the money in the face. But guess what? Sometimes these women needed more than just the money. They needed for them to have a safe space. They needed to be able to communicate. They needed to be able to be vulnerable with you. But a lot of y'all dismiss that because you feel like, I'm the man. Do as I say. Do as I say. Do. And this, I'm a dictator. Man, you know, it's weird as. And this is why the women nowadays, they don't be needing y'all money because y'all lead in a certain type of way, in a certain type of capacity. That's why it's kind of fucked up. So I blame you older because a lot of y'all washed up wasn't doing y'all job by us, even as us, as y'all sons, as y'all grandchildren, as y'all mothers, wives and daughters and like that. Y'all didn't do right. So when we come back and y'all talking about why society or the way it is, y'all is in charge first. You feel me? And like they always say, strong men create easy times, easy men create hard times. And y'all create a lot of hard times for us because some of y'all be in the streets. Some of y'all's gonna be Pablo Escobar, and y'all got caught up on y'all own dope, and y'all crackheads out here. Some of y'all couldn't deal with society, and y'all was drunk, and y'all was around here beating women back then. Like, come on now. So when y'all be trying to talk about the YNs, understand that you suck at.
Yeah. All right. Before Anton speak, I will say this about the gentleman who was just speaking. I believe there were some right things he was saying and wrong things he was saying. If you take my perspective, you know, from this whole situation. So this is what I will say. And he's talking about Generation X when he's talking about the generation before us, you know, and blaming the generation before us for the YNs, you know, if you want to say that, right? So this is why I would say he made some sense with some of the stuff that he said. When it come down to the generation before, you know, my generation, a lot of stuff that he was saying, yeah, that's what was going on. You know, a lot of our fathers went out there and had families, you know, after us, and didn't really pay attention and focus, you know, on us and things like that, right? They were doing their own thing, and one thing that I always say is that when it come down to that generation, I would say, and this is my perspective, I feel don't take a lot of accountability and responsibility for the things that they didn't teach, you know, us. Now, I would say our generation of millennials is a generation of the most independent individuals you will ever find, right? Like, that's our generation. But a lot of times we didn't gain those tools from our uncles, our fathers, and things like that. We knew we had to go out here and figure it out. We had to go out here and get it. And when we were hitting 16, 17, 18, that's when the internet started booming. Social media started to really pop out. So we had other avenues to really go out there and become self-sufficient and independent. So we didn't really need, you know, our fathers and uncles to really build anything for us or show us anything. We just had to go out there and learn it, right? So when it come down to that, there's certain things you could say to where you could say, you know what, it's on y'all. Y'all wasn't giving us the tools. Y'all was teaching us all the wrong things. Y'all wasn't teaching us the right things. So how will we be able to pour into the next generation if y'all didn't teach us anything? You could say that, right? But where I would say he was wrong is that, you know, when it come down to it, these YNs, most of the millennials, those are the kids of the millennials. So if you didn't learn by the time you had kids, that's on you, brother. You can't blame your father, your uncles, and your grandchildren. You got to blame yourself. You got to take accountability and responsibility for what you didn't do. That's the main thing with me. I understand that when it come down to you came from someone. And if you weren't getting the tools as a child, that isn't on you. You weren't getting those tools as a child. But I'm saying by the time you become of age and now you're making decisions for your life, it's on you. It's not on the generation before us. So that's where I would say he was wrong. You're blaming Generation X too much, brother. You know, wheel back a little bit. Take some accountability. I don't know if he have kids and nephews and things like that, but if you're not giving them the right tools, that's on you. You have the responsibility too. A lot of millennials now are in the ages of 40 and a little bit up, not too much up, but you know, in that category now, right? You know, the millennials just started hitting 40, right? And most of them are in their 30s. So where's the accountability at? You're not in your 20s anymore. You know, the YNs are you know, they're still in their late teens and 20s. Where's the accountability, brother? So that's just my perspective of what he said. Now let's get into what Anton said. And sorry for pausing it when Anton was over here, you know, eyes closed and everything. But let's get to it.
Yeah, I get it. I get it, big dog. So you disappointed at the older generation, and I'm assuming that he's a millennial, right? I'm also a millennial. I'm what you call a geriatric millennial. Born in 1982, 80s babies, 90s raised me. And so I can't say that I experienced the same thing as him because I had a great father, but he's right and he's wrong. An older generation of men were simps. But then at the same time, that emotional connection stuff, you also have to factor in feminism and a lot of other things that played a role in the destruction of our households and society.
Now this is where I'm gonna say that so far there's things that Anton said that I agree with. You know, but where I can already tell Anton's perspective is gonna be different is I don't know about the man who was talking, but you know, a lot of us wasn't raised in a 2-parent household. You know, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. So the perspective is gonna be different when it come down to the way Anton thinks. you know, which is great. That's why I think that men need to come together and have conversations, because our perspectives is different. And we believe that we have the right perspective, not understanding that, A, we were brought up differently. So just because my perspective is different than yours doesn't mean mine is wrong. We both can have wrongs to when it come down to the giving information to the next generation, but we also have rights that we could both bring to the table as well, right? So it's important to understand that, because I can already tell that he's going to go into a totally different direction because of his upbringing and the way he was raised. So let's get back to it.
Now, let me preface this by saying again, I don't come from that space. I don't come from a space where I had broken homes. I had a phenomenal father in my life. I have phenomenal uncles in my life. I was raised with 3 brothers and no sisters. And so I come from an era of strong men. You know what I'm saying? So raised in a church, a great space. And so I want to preface it by saying that I've observed a lot of people going through this. And also, I am the opposite of what you then experienced. So my results was a little bit different. My father worked. He took care of all of us. My mom pick and choose when she wanted to work and go to school after the children wind up getting old enough to go to school. And so I just had a phenomenal life. He interceded at times when I needed him to intercede and take me out of a certain school and put me in other schools. So I'm very blessed, and I've always been incredibly thankful, as well as acknowledging and honoring my father and my parents for the job that they did and the life that they gave me, which they weren't rich at all by any means. They were absolutely going through it, but it was a good childhood because I had everything that I needed in order to be successful. Now, with that being said, I believe that he has a point. He's right and he's wrong. First of all, we're going to start with responsibility for the younger dudes. We can't keep making excuses, because once you get old enough to be able to bust it down, you should be responsible for having children. Once you get old enough to be able to go out there and sell crack and make an informed decision and do the things that you're doing, these dudes are shooting up the stores and all of that. And I will also tell you that a lot of these dudes are coming from single parent households, from these single mother households. Now, one of the things that he said was, it's the men and the older guys that, wasn't emotionally supportive that then forced a lot of these people. And now you had a lot of these guys and these daughters is broken and stuff because of that. Yep, I'll give you a little bit of that. But then at the same time, you also have to factor in that feminism played a hell of a role in convincing these women that they didn't need a man. And then more importantly, they went out there, got a bunch of student loans, crashed out, and then they taught their daughters how to slut it out. And nobody ever had a conversation about the fact that it wasn't just a father in a household. It was also the type of women that your mama and your grandmama chose.
All right. Now this right here is where I'm going to differ a little bit from what Anton is saying. So he's right. The feminism movement, getting into the 90s and in early 2000s, it grew dramatically, right? And the government was going against men. We can't give, benefits unless the man is not in the household. I understand all of that, what Anton is saying. But this is one thing that I'm always going to say as a man who come from the background I come from and who I am as just as a man. I'm not going to blame women for the direction that a man take as now a grown man. Now, when it come down to children, I can understand his point when it come down to children to a certain extent, because I always say if a mother do not want a single mother, if she don't want to understand that after 13, there's nothing more that she could do, because I'm big on saying that after 13 as a mother, there's nothing more you could do. So you got to get him around his father or his uncles, or his grandfather, or, put him in some program where you have him going to school, maybe a military school or something. He have to, this 13-year-old that's going to be 18 and a grown man one day, during his 5 years, he got to gain the tools on what it is to be a man. If you don't do that as a mother, yes, it's on you, right? But no matter what, after that after that boy turned into a young man and he get out of the household and he's out there doing his own thing, I can't blame feminism, women. I can't blame none of those, directions on the direction that young man is now taking in life. You are a grown man. You gotta have full accountability and responsibility. So I wouldn't even include feminism in this when it come down to talking about the YNs and why they're in a position that they're in now, and should we blame older men or not. Women are not in this conversation at all. So I don't agree with that. Now, if we want to start talking about feminism when it comes down to relationships between a man and a woman and why the marriage rate has shattered and has dropped dramatically when it comes down to trying to make it work, with a partner and raise a family. If you want to talk about that when it comes to feminism, let's do it. I'm all game when it comes down to that, going into that direction. But when it comes down to talking about the decisions that these young YNs are making with their life and not having grown men around them to help guide them and lead them, I can't talk about women when it comes to that. I just can't. So that's where where I differ with what Anton is talking about. But let's continue to hear let's hear a little bit more of what he's saying, and then we'll go from there.
I will tell you this. It's a lot of dudes, and now we have the technology and the insight and the resources and the information and the conversations amongst men. It's a lot of guys from that generation whose kids wasn't theirs. It's a lot of guys that was in there as step crash dummies. It's a lot of dudes that went out there and tried to get with women that was already out here in these streets, but we didn't have these conversations back then. So I do believe that generation was trash, but for different reasons. They had all of the opportunity in the world. They had the unions. They had the jobs that you can get without you having to go to college. They had the greatest opportunities of all time, and they failed. They failed miserably, and we can have a conversation about how they failed, but a lot of those guys, and of course I'm not talking about everybody, but a lot of those guys, they failed miserably to meet the expectation of what a great man is supposed to be because they were so busy trying to get boxed. Now, there was also a generation of men that came from the war, and so they was messed up. Crack epidemic and all of that stuff, whatever. But largely, to a large extent, those dudes failed miserably, and so we're not going to absolve them of that. Now, on the other end, again, I have to say welfare, feminism, and a lot of the different things that we see happening in the culture today, it was created by the women of yesteryear that chose these trash-ass dudes to have a bunch of children with, and then the next generation of women took that same blueprint and then they did it even worse. And you want to know how I know it? Is because a lot of women nowadays are having conversations with older women online, grandmamas and great-grandmamas, and they telling you, hey, leave that dude alone, leave this alone, go out there and slut it out. I wish I was a feminist. I wish I was independent. And that is still kicking ass and taking names of the women today. And so when he says stuff like, well, they got their own money and all of that, no, they don't. No, they don't. They fucked up.
All right, so let me say this really quick. Let me go up a little bit because I don't want that face that's right up there. Right?
Fuck.
Okay. All right, so let me just say this. I think that Anton is putting way too much on the women. Now, I want to, if just in case Anton ever do see this video, there's a lot of things, brother, that I understand where you coming from, and we align with a lot of ideology when it come down to the man and decision making in this world as a man, right? But I just believe you just put you take a lot of accountability off of the men and put it on the women, and I cannot give the women that much rope. I can't do it. Because to me, as a man, you have to see. I go back to let's get biblical right now, right? Let's go back to in the beginning when it was Adam and Eve, and Eve ate that apple, and then gave it to Adam, and Adam ate the apple. And of course, before Eve came, Adam probably wasn't even thinking about that tree, right? But Adam did eat the apple, and then when, God came and said, "What did you do?" He pointed to Eve and said, "Well, she told me to eat the apple, and I did," right? And that's when, that's when sin came into the world, right? They immediately knew they were naked and tried to cover themselves up. Sin is now entering into the world because Eve told Adam to eat the apple. You know what I always say? To me, that was all the way 100% on Adam. Adam was the man. He should have stood up tall like a man and said, "You know what, Eve, I'm not eating that apple. In fact, get over here, baby. Get over here. None of that. None of that. None of that. We ain't doing that today. We ain't doing that. Because once I eat the apple, it's bad. So we ain't doing that today, Eve." You know what I'm saying? Adam should have laid it down the way a man should always lay it down, right? So when it come down to it, in raising young men, raising boys to become young men, I can't put that on the women. I can't do that. I can't do that, man. Where was the father? Yes, they could have chose a trash dude, but where is that dude at? I'm sorry, it's still that trash dude's fault. Now, if you got to go to court because the woman that you with is not letting you have take care of your child, and after the age of 13 and things like that, and you want to give her some responsibility, fine. But that kid is going to be 18 one day. And when this man is talking about YNs, I'm sure he's talking about the men who are now in their 20s. Just because they're in their 20s doesn't mean you stop being a father. Where still is the father? The only one that can raise boys is men. The only one that can teach men how to be men is men. That's it. A woman cannot teach us how to be a man. So you could put her over the responsibility of a child, but you can't put her over the responsibility of a grown man. You can't do it. It's something in me that I just can't allow it. I can't, man. I can't, because look, and I'm going to say this and we're going to get back to wrapping this up with Anton. Look, man, when I was probably around 12 when my mom sent me out to live, with my pops and my grandparents, right? Now, when I first moved out there, I was living with my grandparents. My pops didn't have a house yet, and my grandparents, have 17 kids. 10 of them are boys, right? So these are all my uncles, right? What I understood later in life when it came down to my mom sending me out there was that my mom is a woman. And I get it. I was being protective as a child, but my mom couldn't have a life with me there because I was very overly protective. I was doing a little bit too much. If I really give y'all some of these stories, I was doing too much, right? My mom didn't know what to do. I never forget when my mom tried to hit me with a belt. I grabbed the belt. I'm like, no more whoopings. We're not doing that no more, right? My mom didn't know what to do with me. You got to put boys around men. You got to blame men for the boys. Period, man. So I can't give that responsibility to the women because to me, women cannot raise not even teenage boys, let alone men. It's not happening. It's not happening. So let's get back to it and then we'll wrap it up.
Up. That's why you see them voting the way that they do. That's why you see a whole bunch of women complaining about the fact that food stamps is not popping. 42 million Americans is on food stamps and they worried about whether or not they're going to get their stuff in November. You're not going to sit here and tell me or try to convince me even a little bit that they doing phenomenal. And so this whole emotional support dog stuff, no, we need men to come back to being men. The problem from that generation is that those men were weak and they were feminized. And so they would go out there and do all of this weird shit and do all of this stuff and start new families. But then at the same time, they let the girls that they was with run roughshod over them. And the reason that they was able to do all of that stuff also is because they had those jobs. They had the union jobs. They was hood rich. You know what I'm saying? And so, yes, I agree with them and I disagree with them. But there's some additional context that we have to add into this conversation that I don't think is being factored into it. And so we do need to take responsibility. And how long are we also going to take? Are we going to continue to have this conversation and blame it entirely on the men without leveraging some responsibility on women? Because I looked at this guy's comments and all you seen was woman looking for an excuse to blame men. And so I don't think that this helps at all. And I respect his opinion. I respect his perspective because I.
All right. So let me wrap it up by saying this. There's a lot of stuff that Anton said that I agreed with, but I think that he focused too much on the women's side of things. I really do. I really feel like he focused way too much on women. I don't believe this conversation right here was a conversation that women should have been included in. I really don't. I believe that when you have this conversation about the YNs, which are young men, you have to talk to the men. You have to talk to the men. This is not a conversation about families, raising a family, marriage, trying to find a wife and everything like that, which when we have those conversations, yes, we have to include the women, and in those conversations nowadays, they get a little bit controversial and tough to have, right? I get that. But when we talking about these young men out here going out here and doing stupid stuff, the only one that can snatch them up is a man. That's it. A woman can't do nothing to these YNs, nothing at all. You know, I get what he's saying. They came up in single parent households and things like that. Now, I did agree with him when he talked about Generation X turning into simps and going out there and being in relationships where the woman is telling them what to do and how to do, and now they controlling them and all of that. I agree. I went through that myself. So I agree with Anton when it come down to that. But when it come down to taking responsibility for the YNs, first and foremost, they got to take responsibility for themselves. That's first and foremost, no matter what. You got to, I say this all the time because it's very important. You got to learn how to rethink and relearn everything. I had to do that at 26 years old. I'll never forget. After my first relationships, after we broke up, I was like, you know what? In order for me to grow in life, I got to start rethinking and relearning everything because I was taught all the wrong things. I started to do that and I started to develop and grow in life, right? I did that by understanding what I had to do as a young man at that time, right? So you have to be accountable for yourself. Second, if we're going to blame anyone, you got to blame the men who was around those young men. You got to blame the fathers and the uncles and all of those men who were around him if you want to blame anyone. But at this stage in life, young dude, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, you can't continue to look back at the mother, man. You can't. A woman can't raise a man. I'm sorry. A woman to me can't even raise a teenage boy. That's what I believe. So this ain't me trying to, pull a simp move, Anton. If you're watching this ain't about that, and try to say, I'm putting it on the men, women get no responsibility. This isn't about that. This is about me fully understanding when I was 12, 13 years old, I would have been danged if my mom would have hit me with that belt again. My mom couldn't do anything with me, brother. Nothing with me. That's why I say a lot of us were just raised differently. Anton's perspective is different because he was raised in a two-parent household where if he would have did what I did in front of his pops would have probably beat the snot out of him. But I was raised in a different household. Single mother, couldn't handle it anymore. I was growing up a little bit too fast, had to send me out there with a bunch of uncles and pops who they were still growing and learning in life. So I didn't necessarily gain the tools that I needed to go out there and be successful as a young man one day. But I was around a lot of strong men, and my grandfather was God-fearing pastor. You know what I'm saying? Strong-minded, strong-willed, very, very masculine men. I grew up around men like that. That's what I will say. And I thank God for that because it taught me not to, be weak, and I didn't have the tools that I needed, but I was always a strong-minded man, right? So that's important. But I knew the difference when it came down to being around my mother and being around, those men who were now in my life. So again, and I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna end it here. There's a lot of things that Anton said that I think was really good. It made a lot of sense, but his perspective is a little different because he was raised differently. But at the end of the day, I can't blame women for the direction that men go into when it come down to now them being grown. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna end it at that. But again, shout out to Anton. This was a cool conversation. I love it. Hopefully one day, man, I could sit next to people like Anton and have these conversations, you know, at a panel, you know, where we could really dig into it and just go back and forth with our perspective. I think that will gain a lot from that, as like men, like the next generation of men could gain a lot from that, right? I think it's very important.
I had to show 'em that I wasn't